everybody, Chelsea here from Sew Simple Home. Today we are going to do a project that I've actually had on my list for several years. We are going to make some pattern weights or fabric weights. These are really great for weighing down paper, like when you want to cut your sewing patterns out. So you can get like metal weights that you can put down. If you're like me, you've probably used like your kids' cars or Legos or scissors or your pincushion, like ridiculous things to weigh down your patterns while you're cutting around them. But now with this simple project, you can make your own pattern weights. Just fill them up with rice. You could use beans, you can use corn. Heck, you could go out and get some gravel from your yard and use gravel if you want. But whatever you want to fill them with, and then they just weigh down your fabric or your paper on your fabric so that it doesn't move while you're cutting it out. So like I said, this is a really quick project. You can print the pattern if you want from our website, and the link is in the profile, or I'll just tell you real quick the measurements. The fabric here, you've got 4 inches by about 7 3/4 of an inch is what I did, and then this one here is about 4 inches and 4 inches by 1 inch is what it is for the little tab. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna sew up our tab. And to do this, we're actually going to kind of make it sort of like a bias tape. So I'm going to fold in both sides of my tab and then just press it down. Like that. And then I'm just going to fold it in half again so that all my raw edges are on the inside of my little tab. And then I'm just going to put it right into my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch along that edge. And if you wanted to do it on both sides, you could, but this is pretty thin. So it's probably better just to do it on the one side. So it kind of looks like that. And if you're wondering what this is, people always ask me, this is the Cricut Easy Press Mini. It is one of my favorite sewing tools now. I mean, I got it to do like Cricut projects with, but it's so good for these little projects. So I'll put a link in the description as well if you're interested in checking that out. But I get that question all the time. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pattern weight fabric here, and I'm going to just fold it in half, matching those short edges. And then I'm going to take my tab that I just sewed up, and I'm going to fold it in half as well. And I am going to place it on the inside of my material here, kind of sandwich it between the two, and like that. And then I'm going to pin it in place, just like that. And then just because I feel like I'm going to pin the other side as well. Okay, so both sides are pinned together. So I have 3 sides that need to be sewn. I'm only going to sew these 2 side seams. I'm going to leave this one open. So I'm going to stitch from here to here. Make sure that you back stitch at the beginning and at the end, because you don't want your rice to fall out because your stitches weren't good. And I'm just going to pull this out and stitch over on this side. All right, now I'll just cut my threads. Okay, so it looks kind of like this, kind of weird. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to go ahead and trim my corners just to get rid of a little bit of bulk. I can get this little guy who is trying to get away from me. Okay, and then I like to press before I turn my material. That way I'm kind of pressing my stitches into the fabric. And then I'm going to turn it right side out. like this. Looks kind of like that. And then I'm just taking the end of a paintbrush and I'm pushing those corners out. You could use a pencil, you could use the end of your seam ripper. There's lots of things that you can use if you don't have like a specific turner. And then again, I'm gonna press my edges so they're nice and flat. All right, now this next step, I guess isn't necessary. I mean, you can just eyeball it, but I like to press my hem first before I add my rice because it makes it really nice and crisp. You can see on this one here, that hem, you can't even see it's in a nice crisp edge of the fold. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to turn my little pattern weight edge inside, just kind of like that, and then I'm going to press it. And the nice thing about this little Cricut mini press, or Cricut Easy Press Mini, is that I can keep my fingers in there while I'm pressing so that I get it nice and even. And I don't necessarily have to get my measuring tape out and make sure everything's perfect, although you most definitely could. Okay, so that you can see now that raw edge is hiding on the inside. That just makes it easier when I go to actually put it in my sewing machine to sew. Okay, next step is doing my rice. I do not have a specific funnel. Maybe you are cooler than me and you have a tiny funnel that you can use. I'm not that cool. I barely have a big funnel that I use when I do some canning. But I'm just using a piece of paper. And if you looked at our lavender sachets, we kind of did the similar method when we made those. So you're just going to take a piece of paper. It can be a scratch piece of paper. It doesn't have to be anything amazing. And you're going to create just a little funnel. And then with a piece of tape, just tape it down. So here's my funnel. That opening might be a little too small, but you can kind of adjust how big of an opening you have, and then you just kind of tape your piece of tape down. And for some reason this year I have lots of rice type projects planned, which is kind of strange for sewing, but so I'm using a lot of funnels. All right, so I have my paper funnel, and I'm just gonna put it right inside of my little pattern weight here. And then I've got my rice. Just gonna pour it in. I'm still making a mess even though I have a funnel. Here's some rice here. Just scoop it in there. Okay, and then I'm just gonna gradually kind of add my rice. And I'm gonna add it pretty close up to the top, to about right, I would say maybe 3/4 of full or 2/3 of the way full. You don't want to go all the way up or else you're not going to be able to actually sew this closed. If you want it to be heavier and more full, then you could definitely hand stitch this close. But I personally don't want too much rice in here, or else you just can't get this under the sewing machine. So I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of rice full is plenty. Okay, now to make the fun kind of triangle shape. So to do that, I'm actually going to, instead of putting it closed like it's this little square, which you totally could, I'm actually going to match the two side seams together, like that. So I've got my side seams together, and then you just pin it in place. So you can kind of see how it makes more of a triangle versus a square. And then I'm just going to place this under my machine and stitch along that that hem that we just made, where we just folded it under. And you can, if you don't overfill your little pattern weight, then you can kind of maneuver it into your machine. Again, if you have too much rice, then you're not going to be able to get it underneath, and it's going to be really frustrating. You also want to make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. My backstitch button's right here. That's where most are. Some of them are up here on the newer electronic one. But that backstitch just goes forward and back, and and secures this stitch in place so that as you're using it, the rice won't eventually fall out because the stitching comes out. But there we go. There's my cute little pattern weight. How fun is that? And now you just get out one of your favorite patterns and you put it down. I've got one right here. But you'd put your fabric down and then you'd use your weights, and then as you're kind of moving things around, that just helps keep that pattern in place. So it would be, pattern weights are a great alternative to actually using pins. So if you don't like using pins, or you have a really big project and you're like, I'm not gonna pin this 5,000 times, pattern weights are a great way to kind of add a little bit of weight to the fabric and to the pattern so that you can go around it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure to check out the link in the description where you can download the free pattern. And if you have questions, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have. And make sure to go check out SewSimpleHome.com for more really fun and easy ideas. We'll see you next time.